The golden summer sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty streets of Belmont, Colorado, as Wyatt Grant stared at his empty plate. The last embers of a life once filled with purpose had faded, leaving him as hollow as the kitchen around him. The year was 1876, and while the nation celebrated its centennial with grand exhibitions in faraway cities, Wyatt found little to commemorate in his own solitary existence. 3 years since losing his wife to fever, the 32-year-old rancher had grown accustomed to the silence that followed him from sunup to sundown, but never comfortable with it. The knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. Few visitors came to his modest homestead 3 miles outside of town, especially at this hour. Rising from his chair, boots scuffing against the worn wooden floor, he approached the door with cautious curiosity. When he pulled it open, the dying sunlight silhouetted Catherine Abernathy's figure against the darkening sky. Her chestnut hair was pinned neatly beneath a modest bonnet, her calico dress dusty from the ride. "Mr. Grant," she said, her voice carrying the slight southern accent that had intrigued the townsfolk since her arrival 6 months ago. "There's still coffee if you'd share." Wyatt blinked, confusion evident on his weathered face. "Miss Abernathy, is everything all right?" She held up a small package wrapped in brown paper. "Coffee. I noticed you were low last time I was in your store. I made too much for just myself tonight and thought." Her voice trailed off, uncertainty replacing her initial confidence. Wyatt's general store, the only one in Belmont, was his livelihood, though he ran it with the same mechanical efficiency with which he approached everything since Martha's passing. "That's kind of you," he said, stepping aside. "Please come in." Catherine hesitated briefly before entering, her eyes scanning the sparse kitchen. The table was clean but for his empty plate and cup. No decorations adorned the walls, no touches of warmth to suggest a home rather than merely shelter. "You've already had supper," she observed, laying the package on the table. "Just finished." Wyatt cleared his throat. "But coffee would be welcome. Can I offer you something to eat?" "No, thank you, I've eaten." She moved to the stove with a familiarity that surprised him. "Do you mind if I heat this?" As she busied herself with the coffee, Wyatt studied her. Catherine Abernathy had arrived in Belmont in the dead of winter, taking over the vacant schoolhouse position after old Mrs. Hendricks finally retired. At 28, she was older than most unmarried women who took up teaching, and rumors about her past circulated through town like tumbleweeds. Some said she was running from the law back east. Others whispered about a broken engagement to a wealthy man who'd chosen another. Wyatt had paid the gossip little mind. "Is something wrong with the schoolhouse?" he asked, wondering about the true purpose of her visit. Catherine turned, a small smile playing at her lips. "The schoolhouse is fine, Mr. Grant. I simply thought you might appreciate the company." "Company." The word felt foreign on his tongue. "Yes, company." She poured the steaming coffee into 2 cups she'd found in his cupboard. "It's occurred to me that you and I are perhaps the 2 loneliest people in Belmont." Her directness surprised him. Women in these parts typically approached matters more circuitously. "What makes you think I'm lonely?" "Your eyes," she said simply, placing a cup before him and taking a seat across the table. "They're the same as mine when I catch my reflection in the window glass." Wyatt wrapped his fingers around the warm cup, unsure how to respond. 3 years of minimal conversation had dulled his social graces. "I've lost someone too," she continued softly. "Not a spouse, but my brother. The war took him, then typhoid took my parents soon after. I came west because there was nothing left for me in Virginia." "I'm sorry for your losses," Wyatt said, the words feeling inadequate, "as I am for yours. The whole town knows about Martha." Wyatt nodded, taking a sip of the coffee. It was rich and strong, better than the weak brew he typically made for himself. "This is good. Thank you. Good coffee is one of life's simple pleasures, wouldn't you agree?" "I suppose it is." They fell into silence, but it wasn't the oppressive quiet that usually surrounded Wyatt. This silence felt different, expectant, almost comfortable, Mr. Grant, I'll be direct. I didn't just come here to share coffee. Catherine's fingers tightened around her cup. I came because the school board is threatening to close the school. Wyatt straightened. Close it. Why would they do that? Money, primarily. Enrollment is low, and they're considering consolidating with Silver Creek School. The children would have to travel 10 miles each way. That's not feasible, especially in winter. Precisely my argument. But Mayor Thornton insists the town can't afford to keep it open another year. Wyatt frowned. Thornton had been pushing to redirect town funds toward projects that primarily benefited his mining investments. What does this have to do with me? You're respected in Belmont. People listen to you. More importantly, you serve on the town council and the vote is next week. Catherine's eyes were earnest. I need your support to keep the school open. Wyatt ran a hand through his hair, understanding now why she'd come. It wasn't company she sought, but an ally. The realization disappointed him more than it should have. I haven't attended a council meeting in almost a year, he admitted. Then perhaps it's time you did. She set her cup down firmly. These children deserve an education, Mr. Grant. Some of them walk 3 miles already just to reach the schoolhouse. Asking them to go further is unreasonable. He studied her, noting the passion that animated her features. You care a great deal about this. I do. Teaching is more than just a position to me. It's my purpose. She leaned forward. Don't you remember having a teacher who made a difference in your life? Wyatt thought back to Mr. Peterson, who'd recognized his aptitude for mathematics and encouraged him long after others had given up. That encouragement had served him well when he'd opened his store, allowing him to keep his books meticulously. I do, he conceded. Then help me be that teacher for these children. Wyatt considered her request. Returning to council meetings meant engaging with the community again, something he'd deliberately avoided. After Martha died, the pitying glances and awkward conversations had been unbearable. He'd retreated into himself, running his store with efficiency but little warmth, speaking only when necessary. I'll think about it, he said finally. Catherine's shoulders slumped slightly, but she nodded. That's all I ask. She finished her coffee and stood. Thank you for the hospitality, Mr. Grant. Wait, Wyatt said, surprising himself. How do you propose we convince the council to keep the school open? A small, hopeful smile crossed her face. I have some ideas if you're willing to hear them. For the next hour, they sat at his kitchen table while Catherine outlined her plan. She spoke of organizing a community fundraiser, soliciting donations from the wealthier families, and potentially combining the school with a community library. Wyatt found himself drawn in by her enthusiasm, making suggestions of his own. The miners' families would support this, he noted. Many of them came here specifically because Belmont offered schooling for their children. Exactly, Catherine's eyes lit up. If we could get them to attend the council meeting, show the true demand. Thornton would have a harder time dismissing it, Wyatt finished. He found himself smiling, a small, rusty expression, but genuine. When Catherine finally rose to leave, the night had fully settled around them. I should get back before it's too late, she said, gathering her shawl. Let me hitch up the wagon. It's not safe for you to ride alone at this hour. She started to protest, then acquiesced. Thank you, Mr. Grant. As Wyatt led his horses from the stable, he realized this was the most he'd spoken to anyone in months. More surprisingly, he had enjoyed it. Catherine Abernathy had brought something into his kitchen, besides coffee she had brought life. The wagon creaked along the moonlit road toward town, the cool night air carrying the scent of sage and pine. They rode in companionable silence until the lights of Belmont appeared in the distance. I'll come to the council meeting, Wyatt said suddenly. And I'll speak in favor of keeping the school open. Catherine turned to him, her face half illuminated by moonlight. Thank you, truly. As he helped her down from the wagon in front of her small cottage near the schoolhouse, their hands met briefly. A current seemed to pass between them, startling in its intensity. Good night, Mr. Grant, she said, withdrawing her hand. Wyatt, he corrected, the word emerging almost unbidden. My name is Wyatt, she smiled, the gesture transforming her already pleasant features into something beautiful. Good night, Wyatt. Thank you for sharing the coffee. As he drove back to his homestead, Wyatt realized the heaviness that had become his constant companion had lifted slightly. The kitchen that had felt so empty earlier would still be empty when he returned, but somehow the prospect seemed less bleak. For the first time in 3 years, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow. The town council meeting hall was more crowded than Wyatt had seen it in years. Word had spread quickly about the threatened closure of the schoolhouse, and it seemed every parent in Belmont had turned out. Mayor Harold Thornton, a rotund man whose wealth came from strategic investments rather than honest labor, looked distinctly uncomfortable at the podium. Order, please, he called, rapping his gavel. We have a full agenda tonight, and the school matter is just one item to be discussed. It's the only item that matters, called out Jacob Miller, a miner whose 3 young children attended the school. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Wyatt, seated near the back, caught Catherine's eye from where she sat with several of her students' mothers. She offered a small nod of encouragement. When the time came to discuss the school, Thornton presented his case with the cool detachment of a man discussing ledgers rather than children's futures. The simple fact is that maintaining the schoolhouse costs more than our current budget allows. With only 23 students enrolled, the per-pupil expense is prohibitive. And how much are you planning to spend on that new road to your silver mine? Called another voice from the crowd. Thornton's face reddened. That road benefits the entire community by creating jobs. So does the school, someone else shouted. The mayor rapped his gavel again. Unless someone has a practical solution to present, I suggest we move forward with the vote. Catherine stood. I'd like to speak, if I may. Thornton waved a hand impatiently. Make it brief, Miss Abernathy. With poise that commanded attention, Catherine walked to the front of the room. The proposal before you tonight isn't just about budget lines, it's about our commitment to these children and their futures. She gestured to where several of her students sat with their parents. When I came to Belmont, I was told this was a community that valued education, that it was a place where families could put down roots, knowing their children would have opportunities. She proceeded to outline the plan she and Wyatt had discussed, her voice clear and compelling. When she mentioned the community fundraiser, several wealthy ranchers' wives nodded approvingly. Her proposal to combine the school with a lending library drew interested murmurs. Finally, Catherine said, I've taken it upon myself to reduce my own salary by 15% if that would help keep the school open. Wyatt's head snapped up at this. She hadn't mentioned this part to him. From what he knew, she already lived modestly, taking in mending work to supplement her teaching income. A noble gesture, Thornton said dismissively, but still insufficient to address the budget shortfall. That was when Wyatt found himself standing, all eyes turning toward him. Many looked surprised. He rarely spoke at these meetings even before his withdrawal from town life. Mayor Thornton, council members, he began, his voice rough from disuse in such settings. I've been doing some calculations based on the town's financial statements. He approached the front, pulling a folded paper from his pocket. His years of keeping meticulous store records had served him well as he'd pored over the town's publicly available accounts the previous night. If we redirect funds from the proposed expansion of the mayor's office and postpone the decorative fountain for the town square, we could fully fund the school for another 2 years. He laid out the numbers clearly, pointing out several other areas where expenses could be trimmed without affecting essential services. Thornton's face grew increasingly flushed as Wyatt spoke. Those projects have already been approved by a council vote that can be reconsidered, interrupted Councilman Fletcher, studying the figures Wyatt had presented. These numbers appear sound. For the next half hour, the council debated the matter, with Thornton growing increasingly isolated as support swelled for Catherine's proposal. bolstered by Wyatt's financial analysis. When the final vote came, it was 6-1 in favor of keeping the school open, with only Thornton dissenting. The room erupted in cheers. Parents hugged their children, and several people clapped Wyatt on the back as he made his way through the crowd. He felt a strange mix of discomfort and satisfaction at being the center of attention. Mr. Grant. Two young boys approached him excitedly. "Ma says you saved our school. Is it true you fought off a whole band of outlaws once?" Wyatt blinked, startled by the question and the apparent embellishment of his reputation. "I'm afraid not. I just run the general store." "But Pa says you tracked down the men who robbed your wagon train years ago," the older boy insisted. "That's enough, Timothy," Catherine said, approaching with an apologetic smile. "Mr. Grant doesn't need to be bothered with questions." "It's all right," Wyatt said, surprising himself. To the boys, he added, "That story's been exaggerated quite a bit. I just helped the sheriff identify some men who'd stolen supplies. That's all." The boys looked mildly disappointed, but still impressed enough to run off sharing whispered theories about his supposed heroics. "Children and their imaginations," Catherine said, watching them go. "Although I suspect their fathers might be the ones embellishing. People do like their stories out here." Wyatt shuffled awkwardly. "You didn't mention you were planning to reduce your salary." Catherine's smile faded. "I did what was necessary." "Can you afford such a reduction?" She lifted her chin slightly. "I'll manage." Before he could respond, they were interrupted by a group of mothers expressing their gratitude to both of them. By the time Wyatt extracted himself from the conversations, Catherine had been pulled aside by the school board members to discuss implementation of her proposals. He waited for her outside the hall, watching as the townsfolk dispersed into the warm summer evening. When she finally emerged, she looked tired but triumphant. "Walk you home?" he offered. "Thank you, that would be kind." She fell into step beside him. "I can't thank you enough for what you did in there. Your financial analysis was brilliant." "Numbers have always made sense to me," he said with a shrug. "But it was your plan that won them over." They walked in silence for a moment, the sounds of the town piano music from the saloon, distant laughter, the occasional whinny of horses creating a backdrop to their thoughts. "About your salary reduction," Wyatt said finally. "I'd like to propose an alternative." Catherine glanced at him curiously. "The store's been doing well. I could provide supplies for the school at cost: books, paper, chalk, whatever you need. It would save more than your salary reduction would contribute." "That's very generous, but it's not generosity, it's practical. The school brings families to Belmont and families buy supplies." He hesitated. "And it's the right thing to do." Catherine studied him in the lamplight of Main Street. "You're not what people say you are, Wyatt Grant." "What do they say I am?" "A recluse, cold, some even say heartless since your wife passed." The words stung, though he'd suspected such talk existed. People should mind their own business. "Perhaps, but when someone withdraws as completely as you have, people fill the silence with their own explanations." She touched his arm lightly. "I think they're wrong for what it's worth." Her touch, brief as it was, left a warmth that lingered. They continued walking, turning onto the quieter street where her cottage stood among several others rented primarily to single women: the seamstress, the telegraph operator, and now the schoolteacher. "Will you come to the fundraiser next Saturday?" Catherine asked as they reached her door. "Your presence would lend it significance." Wyatt hesitated. One council meeting was one thing, a social gathering was quite another. Catherine seemed to sense his reluctance. "Just consider it, you don't have to decide now." "I'll think about it," he promised, the same words he'd offered when she'd first come to his kitchen with coffee. She smiled knowingly. "Good night, Wyatt." "Good night, Catherine." As he walked back through town toward his homestead, Wyatt realized he'd called her by her first name without thinking. More surprising was how natural it had felt. The week that followed saw Wyatt making changes to his routine that would have been unthinkable just days before. He reorganized the store's inventory to create a section specifically for school supplies, ordering additional materials from Denver. He found himself engaging more with his customers, asking after their families, listening to their concerns rather than merely completing transactions. On Thursday, Catherine stopped by the store with a list of needed supplies for the fundraiser. "We're planning games for the children, refreshments, even some music if Mr. Callahan is willing to bring his fiddle," she explained, watching as he noted each item. "The whole town seems excited." "I've noticed," Wyatt said. Indeed, the store had been busier than usual as women purchased fabric for new ribbons and men came in for small luxuries they typically denied themselves. Community events were rare enough in Belmont to be treated as special occasions. "And what about you?" Catherine asked. "Will you attend?" Wyatt set down his pencil. "I'm not much for socializing." "I've noticed," she replied with a small smile echoing his words. "But people have been asking if you'll be there. You've become something of a local hero for standing up to Thornton." "That's ridiculous. I just presented some figures." "You did more than that. You engaged with the community when it mattered." She gathered her shawl, preparing to leave. "The fundraiser starts at 4. If you change your mind, I've saved a spot at the refreshment table that could use a steady hand for pouring lemonade." After she left, Wyatt stood staring at the list she'd given him, thinking not of the items but of her invitation. The thought of attending still made his palms sweat, but for the first time in years, the idea of avoiding a social gathering felt more uncomfortable than participating in one. Saturday arrived with perfect weather, as if even the heavens supported Catherine's cause. Wyatt spent the morning delivering the promised supplies to the town square where the fundraiser was being held, carefully avoiding getting drawn into the preparations. By mid-afternoon, he was back at his homestead, standing before the small mirror in his bedroom, contemplating his reflection. He'd trimmed his beard, a task he usually performed with utilitarian indifference. Today, he'd taken care to shape it properly. His best shirt, rarely worn since Martha's funeral, felt stiff and formal, but he supposed that was appropriate. This wasn't a casual outing but a community obligation. At least, that's what he told himself as he hitched the wagon and headed back to town. It had nothing to do with Catherine Abernathy's bright eyes or the way her presence seemed to fill a room with possibility. The town square had been transformed. Colorful bunting hung between trees, tables laden with food and drink lined one side, and children darted about playing games organized by the older students. A small platform had been erected where Mr. Callahan was indeed playing his fiddle, accompanied by 2 other musicians Wyatt didn't recognize. He had barely tied his horses to the hitching post when Timothy, the boy from the council meeting, spotted him. Mr. Grant came, Ma. Just like Miss Abernathy said he would. Heads turned in his direction, and Wyatt fought the urge to retreat to his wagon. Then Catherine was approaching, wearing a blue dress he hadn't seen before, her hair arranged more elaborately than usual with a single ribbon woven through it. "You decided to come," she said, her smile bright with genuine pleasure. "I said I'd think about it," he replied. "I thought. And what conclusion did your thinking yield? That I've spent too long sitting in an empty kitchen." Something flickered in her eyes, understanding, perhaps, or approval. "Well, we're glad to have you. The lemonade table awaits your steady hand if you're still willing." For the next 2 hours, Wyatt found himself at the center of a steady stream of townsfolk. Pouring lemonade provided a structured way to interact, brief, purposeful exchanges that didn't require extensive conversation. To his surprise, he found it manageable, even occasionally pleasant, especially when children approached with their earnest requests and wide-eyed curiosity. "Is it true you fought in the war, Mr. Grant?" asked one young girl as he handed her a cup. "I did, but I don't talk about that much," he replied gently. "My pa did too. He doesn't talk about it either." She accepted the lemonade with a solemn nod as if they shared an important understanding. As the evening progressed, Wyatt found himself observing Catherine. She moved through the crowd with natural grace, engaging with everyone from the wealthiest ranch owner's wife to the most humble miner's child. There was something genuine in her manner that people responded to, a quality that had apparently been evident to everyone but him until now. When the dancing began, she was immediately claimed by Jacob Miller for the first set. Wyatt watched from his station, telling himself the tightness in his chest was merely unease at the increasingly rowdy gathering. "You should ask her to dance," said a voice beside him. Wyatt turned to find Mrs. Peterson, the widow who ran the boarding house, giving him a knowing look. "I don't dance," he said shortly. "You used to, with Martha. I remember you two at the harvest festival the year before she fell ill." Wyatt stiffened. Few people mentioned Martha to him directly anymore. "That was a long time ago." Mrs. Peterson's weathered face softened. "Not so long that you should forget how I think." Before he could respond, she moved on, leaving him unsettled. The music changed to a slower tune, and he watched as Catherine declined another dance, making her way instead toward the refreshment table toward him. "Our fundraiser is a success," she said, reaching for a cup of water. "We've already collected enough to cover repairs to the schoolhouse roof and purchase new readers for the younger children." "That's good news." She studied him for a moment. "You've been at this table all evening. Aren't you going to participate in any of the festivities?" "I am participating. I'm pouring lemonade." Catherine laughed, the sound carrying over the music. "So literal, Mr. Grant. I meant the dancing or the horseshoe tournament or even just walking around enjoying the company." Before he could formulate a response, Mayor Thornton approached, his face flushed from exertion or drink or both. "Miss Abernathy," he said, his voice overly loud, "I believe you promised me a dance." Catherine's smile became fixed. "I don't recall making such a promise, Mayor." "Come now, no need for modesty. A beautiful woman like yourself shouldn't stand idle while the music plays." He reached for her arm. Wyatt stepped forward instinctively. "The lady declined, Thornton." The mayor's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't concern you, Grant." "It does when you're harassing someone at an event I'm helping to host." A tense silence fell between them, the festivities continuing unabated around their small pocket of conflict. Thornton finally released a forced laugh. "Always the gentleman, aren't you, Grant? Very well." He gave a mocking half-bow to Catherine. "Perhaps another time, Miss Abernathy, when you're not so preoccupied." As he walked away, Catherine released a slow breath. "Thank you, he's been persistent all evening. Are you all right, of course?" "It's not the first time I've had to manage unwanted attention." She straightened her shoulders. "But I would like that dance now if you're offering." Wyatt blinked, caught off guard. I know you didn't, I'm asking you." She held out her hand. "Unless you truly can't remember how." He realized Mrs. Peterson must have mentioned their conversation. "I remember," he said quietly. Taking her hand, he led her to the edge of the area cleared for dancing. The music was slow and familiar, a waltz that required minimal skill for those who knew the basic steps. As they joined the other couples, Wyatt was acutely aware of eyes upon them. The reclusive widower and the schoolteacher would provide gossip for weeks. Catherine seemed unconcerned, following his lead with natural grace. "See, not so difficult to rejoin the world of the living." "Is that what I'm doing, isn't it?" Her gaze was direct. "For 3 years, from what I understand, you've been going through the motions, running your store, attending to necessities, but not really living." Wyatt's steps faltered slightly. "You've been asking about me. People talk. Especially about those who don't talk much themselves." He guided her through a turn, surprised at how easily the movements came back to him. "And what conclusion have you drawn from all this talk?" That grief can become a habit, one that's hard to break even when the sharpest pain has dulled. Her hand tightened slightly in his. "I understand that more than most. Because of your brother?" "Yes, and because of what came after." There was something in her voice that suggested deeper waters than she was revealing. They danced in silence for a moment, the music weaving around them, creating a temporary shelter from the curious glances of the townspeople. "Why did you really come to my kitchen that night?" Wyatt asked finally. "Was it just about the school?" Catherine considered him, her expression thoughtful. "No," she admitted. "Not entirely. I had noticed your solitude, your quiet competence, the way you help others without drawing attention to it." "What do you mean?" "I mean the extra flour you slip into Mrs. Wilson's order when she can't quite afford enough for her 5 children. Or the way you extended credit to the Fergusons after their barn burned, even though everyone knows they might never be able to repay it." Wyatt was startled by her observations. He'd thought his small gestures of charity went unnoticed. "You see more than most," he said. "I pay attention," she corrected. "It's a habit that serves a teacher well. And what I saw was someone who cared about this community far more than he let on." Her eyes held his. "Someone who might care about other things too, if given the chance." The music ended before he could respond, the moment broken by applause and the shifting of couples. Catherine stepped back, releasing his hand. "Thank you for the dance, Mr. Grant." "Wyatt," he reminded her. "Wyatt," she acknowledged with a smile. "And thank you for coming tonight. It means more than you know." As she turned to attend to one of her students who was calling for her, Wyatt found himself standing alone at the edge of the dancing area, feeling strangely bereft. The evening continued around him, lively music, laughter, the warm glow of lanterns as twilight deepened, but his thoughts remained fixed on Catherine and the brief connection they'd shared. More than that, he was troubled by her observations. Had he really been merely going through the motions these past years? And if so, what did it mean that, for the first time since Martha's death, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow? The fundraiser's success exceeded everyone's expectations. By summer's end, the schoolhouse boasted a new roof, freshly painted walls, and an expanded selection of books that formed the beginning of Belmont's first library. Catherine's position was secured with a formal 2-year contract, and enrollment increased as word spread of the school's reprieve. Wyatt found himself drawn increasingly into the community's affairs, attending council meetings regularly and even helping to organize a harvest festival in October. His store expanded its inventory to include more educational materials, and he established a small reading area where children could browse books while their parents shopped. Throughout it all, his connection with Catherine deepened through shared projects and quiet conversations. They established a routine of sorts. She would stop by the store on Wednesdays to discuss school needs, and occasionally he would bring supplies directly to the schoolhouse on Friday afternoons, staying to help with repairs or simply to talk after the children had gone home. It was during one such Friday in late October, with the aspens turning gold against the mountains and the air carrying the first hints of winter, that Catherine shared more of her past with him. They sat on the schoolhouse steps, watching the sunset paint the western sky in shades of orange and purple. Wyatt had just finished repairing a broken window frame, and Catherine had brewed tea on the small stove inside. "I was engaged once," she said suddenly, her hands wrapped around her teacup for warmth. "Back in Virginia before the war." Wyatt glanced at her, surprised by the disclosure. "What happened?" "He joined the Confederate Army like my brother. Unlike my brother, he returned." Her gaze remained fixed on the distant mountains. "But he came back changed, bitter, angry at the world. The man I had agreed to marry no longer existed. I'm sorry. Don't be. Breaking our engagement was my choice, though it scandalized my family." A small, sad smile crossed her face. "After my parents died, there was nothing left for me there. Too many memories, too much judgment from people who thought they understood what honor required of a proper Southern woman." "So you came west?" "Yes. I had teaching experience from helping at my church school, and I'd heard the territories needed educated women." She turned to look at him directly. "I never expected to find a place that felt like home again, but Belmont has become that in a way Virginia never could be now." Wyatt understood the sentiment all too well. He'd come to Colorado as a young man seeking opportunity, finding it in a small store whose elderly owner had been eager to sell. He'd sent for Martha, his sweetheart from back in Missouri, once he'd established himself. They'd built a life together, planned for children that never came, and then suddenly she was gone, leaving him with a business that provided his livelihood but little joy. "Home is more than just a place," he said quietly. "Yes, it is." Catherine set down her cup. "It's the connections we make. The people who see us as we truly are." Her words hung in the cooling air between them, carrying meaning beyond their simple truth. Wyatt found himself studying her profile, noting the strength in her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes, the small lines at their corners that appeared when she smiled. "Catherine," he began, uncertain of what he wanted to say but knowing he needed to say something. The moment was broken by the approach of a rider, coming fast up the road toward the schoolhouse. They both stood, watching as Jacob Miller pulled his horse to a halt before them. "Miss Abernathy, Mr. Grant," he panted, his face flushed with exertion. "There's been an accident at the mine, a cave-in. Men are trapped, including my brother. Doc Simmons is calling for anyone who can help with the rescue." Without hesitation, Wyatt turned to Catherine. "I need to go." "Of course. I'll come too. They may need help with the injured." They hurried to Wyatt's wagon, which was loaded with the tools he'd brought for repairs. The ride to the Silver Creek mine was tense, the setting sun casting long shadows that seemed ominous portents of what awaited them. The scene at the mine was one of controlled chaos. Lanterns illuminated a crowd of worried families held back from the mine entrance, where a team of men worked frantically to clear debris. Doc Simmons had set up a makeshift treatment area, and several women were tearing sheets into bandages. "Grant," called Simmons when he spotted them. "Good, we need strong backs. They're trying to shore up the tunnel enough to reach the trapped men." Wyatt nodded, stripping off his coat. To Catherine, he said, "Stay with the doctor. Help where you can." "Be careful," she replied, her hand briefly touching his arm before she hurried toward the medical station. For the next several hours, Wyatt worked alongside the other men, moving rubble and helping to position support beams in the unstable tunnel. The air was thick with dust and fear, punctuated by shouted instructions, and the occasional distant sound that might have been trapped miners signaling their position. It was well past midnight when they finally broke through to the chamber where 5 men had been working when the tunnel collapsed. 3 were injured but alive. 1 had been killed instantly by falling rock. The 5th, Daniel Miller, Jacob's brother, lay unconscious with a severe head wound. As they carried the injured men out to the waiting doctor, Wyatt caught sight of Catherine. She had shed her shawl and rolled up her sleeves, her dress stained with blood and dirt as she helped Simmons tend to the wounded. Despite the grim circumstances, he was struck by her calm efficiency and unwavering focus. When Daniel Miller was brought out, Catherine moved immediately to help the doctor assess his injuries. Wyatt watched as she spoke softly to Jacob, who hovered anxiously nearby, her hand on his shoulder offering comfort even as she assisted with his brother's care. By dawn, the immediate crisis had passed. The dead miner, Pete Carson, had been taken to the undertakers. The 3 less severely injured men had been transported to their homes with instructions for care. Daniel Miller, still unconscious, had been moved to Doc Simmons' office, where the doctor could monitor him more closely. Wyatt found Catherine sitting on a tree stump near the mine entrance, her face drawn with fatigue, hands clasped loosely in her lap. "You should get some rest," he said, sitting beside her. "So should you." She looked up at him, concern evident despite her exhaustion. "Are you hurt?" "Just some bruises and scrapes, nothing serious." He flexed his hands, which were raw from hours of moving rock. "You were remarkable in there." "I did what anyone would do." "No, not anyone. You knew exactly what to do, how to help Simmons, how to comfort those families." He studied her curiously. "Where did you learn such skills?" Catherine was silent for a moment, her gaze distant. "During the war," she finally said. "After my brother was wounded, I volunteered at the hospital in Richmond. I saw many things no one should have to see." Understanding dawned on Wyatt. The calm capability she had shown tonight came from experience with situations far worse than this. "That explains a lot," he said softly. "Does it?" There was a wariness in her voice. about your strength, your compassion." He reached out, gently taking one of her dirt-streaked hands in his. Catherine, again, they were interrupted, this time by Doc Simmons calling for Catherine. "Miss Abernathy." Daniels regained consciousness and is asking for his wife. "Could you fetch Mrs. Miller? I'd send my boy, but he's finally fallen asleep after helping all night." Catherine squeezed Wyatt's hand before releasing it. "We should get the Millers," she said, rising wearily to her feet. "I'll take you in the wagon," Wyatt offered, standing as well. "You're in no condition to walk all that way." They made their way to the Miller home in the growing light of dawn, delivered the news to Daniel's relieved wife and children, and transported the family back to the doctor's office. By the time these tasks were complete, the town was coming fully awake, with news of the mine accident spreading quickly. Catherine declined Wyatt's offer to take her home, insisting on staying to help with the other injured miners. He reluctantly left her at Doc Simmons' office, returning to the mine where cleanup efforts would continue throughout the day. It was evening before they saw each other again, when Wyatt stopped by the doctor's office with food prepared by several of the town's women. Catherine was sitting beside Daniel Miller's bed, reading to him while his wife took a much-needed rest. "I brought dinner," Wyatt said from the doorway, holding up a basket. Catherine looked up, a tired smile crossing her face. "That was thoughtful." "Daniel, would you mind if I stepped away for a few minutes?" The injured miner waved a weak hand. "Go on, Miss Abernathy, you've been here all day, take a proper break." They moved to Doc Simmons' small kitchen, where Wyatt unpacked the basket bread, cold chicken, apple pie, and a thermos of coffee. Catherine sank gratefully into a chair. "You must be exhausted," he said, pouring her a cup of coffee. "I am, but Daniel is improving, which is what matters." She accepted the cup with a murmured thanks. "What about the mine? Will they be able to reopen it? Not the south tunnel where the accident happened. It's too unstable. But the main shaft is secure, according to the foreman. They'll resume limited operations next week." Wyatt served her a plate of food. "Eat something. You've been taking care of everyone else all day." Catherine took a small bite of chicken, then another, her hunger apparently awakening with the first taste. They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes, the events of the past 24 hours creating a bond that needed no words. "What were you going to say?" she asked suddenly. "Last night, before we were interrupted," Wyatt set down his fork, considering his response. The intensity of the mine disaster had clarified certain feelings that had been growing within him for months, but he was unsure if this was the right moment to express them. "It can wait," he said finally. "You need rest, not conversation." Catherine studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. "Perhaps, but I find I'm curious all the same." Before he could respond, Doc Simmons bustled in, looking nearly as tired as Catherine. "Ah, food, excellent." He helped himself to a plate, nodding toward the front room. "Mrs. Miller is back with Daniel." "You're free to go, Miss Abernathy, with my profound thanks for your assistance." "Are you sure you don't need me to stay longer?" "Quite sure. The crisis has passed, and you've been here since yesterday evening." He fixed her with a professional gaze. "As your doctor, I'm ordering you to go home and sleep." Catherine smiled tiredly. "In that case, I suppose I must comply." "I'll take you home," Wyatt said, rising. To Simmons, he added, "We'll leave the rest of the food for you and your patients." The doctor nodded gratefully, already focused on his meal. Outside, the evening was cool and clear, stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Catherine swayed slightly as they walked to Wyatt's wagon, fatigue finally overtaking her. "Here," he said, placing a steadying hand at her elbow. "Let me help you." He lifted her into the wagon, concern growing as he noted her pallor in the fading light. The short ride to her cottage was quiet, Catherine leaning against the seat back with eyes half closed. When they arrived, Wyatt helped her down and walked her to her door. "Will you be all right?" he asked as she fumbled with her key. "Just tired," she assured him. "Nothing a good night's sleep won't cure." "Catherine," he said, making a sudden decision, "I care for you, more than I thought possible after Martha. That's what I wanted to tell you last night." She stilled, key in the lock, then turned to face him. In the dim light from her porch lantern, her expression was difficult to read. "Wyatt," she began, then faltered. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything now. You're exhausted and this isn't the time." He took a step back. "I just wanted you to know." A small smile touched her lips. "I care for you too, but you're right, this isn't the moment for such a conversation." She reached out, briefly touching his hand. "Come for supper tomorrow, we can talk then." "I'll come," he promised. He waited until she was safely inside, then made his way back to the wagon, his heart lighter despite his physical exhaustion. The possibility that had been growing between them for months had finally been acknowledged, and tomorrow they would explore what it might mean. But tomorrow brought unexpected complications. Wyatt awoke to find Mayor Thornton on his doorstep, his face grave. "Grant," he said without preamble, "we have a situation in town. The accident has people scared. They're talking about closing the mine permanently." "Maybe they should," Wyatt replied, inviting the mayor inside despite their differences. "That south tunnel was never properly supported." "That's beside the point." Thornton paced Wyatt's kitchen, the same kitchen where this all had begun with a shared cup of coffee. "If the mine closes, half the town loses their livelihood. Belmont could become a ghost town within a year." Wyatt frowned. As much as he disliked Thornton, the man had a point. The mine was the economic heart of Belmont. "What does this have to do with me?" "The miners respect you, especially after yesterday. If you speak in favor of reopening the main shaft after proper inspections, it would go a long way toward calming fears." It was a reasonable request, which made Wyatt instantly suspicious. "And what do you get out of this, Thornton?" "You don't own the mine." The mayor's expression soured. "No, but I've invested heavily in Belmont's future. If the town dies, so do those investments." He straightened his vest. "There's a meeting at noon in the town hall. I'm asking you to attend and speak." After Thornton left, Wyatt considered his options. Supporting the mine's reopening was the practical choice for the town's survival, but he couldn't in good conscience advocate for it without assurances of improved safety measures. By the time he reached town, rumors were flying. Some said the mine owners were planning to close permanently and leave town. Others claimed the accident had revealed a rich new silver vein that would make Belmont prosperous beyond imagination. The truth, as usual, likely lay somewhere in between. The town hall was packed when Wyatt arrived. He spotted Catherine near the front, sitting with Jacob Miller's family. Their eyes met briefly, and she offered a small smile that warmed him despite the tension in the room. The meeting was contentious from the start. Mine representatives argued for a swift reopening of the main shaft, while several miners, including those who had been injured, demanded better safety measures. Family members of Pete Carson, who had died in the collapse, called for the mine to be closed entirely. When Wyatt was called upon to speak, he chose his words carefully. "I've lived in Belmont for 11 years now. I've seen the mine bring prosperity and I've seen it bring tragedy. What happened yesterday was preventable." He paused, looking directly at the mine owners. "I support reopening the main shaft, but only after a complete safety inspection by an independent engineer from Denver, and only with the implementation of improved support structures in all working tunnels." His proposal was met with a mix of approval and skepticism. The mine owners reluctantly agreed to the inspection, but balked at the cost of the suggested improvements. "It's too expensive," argued Harold Wilson, the mine's principal owner. "We operate on narrow margins as it is." "What's the cost of a human life, Mr. Wilson?" Catherine stood, her voice clear and strong despite her evident fatigue. "Pete Carson left a widow and 3 children. Daniel Miller might never work again. Are their lives and livelihoods worth less than your profits?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "Of course not, Miss Abernathy. But the practical reality, Wyatt interrupted, is that you'll have no workers at all if they believe you value silver more than their safety. And without workers, you have no mine." The debate continued for another hour, but eventually a compromise was reached. The mine would remain closed for 2 weeks while an inspector from Denver assessed the situation. Based on his recommendations, necessary improvements would be made before any miners returned to work. In the meantime, the town council would establish a relief fund for affected families, with the mine owners contributing a significant portion. As the meeting dispersed, Wyatt made his way to Catherine. "You spoke well," he said, "as did you. I think the miners were relieved to have someone articulate their concerns so clearly." She looked tired but resolute. "Is our supper still on for tonight? I should warn you I'm not much of a cook." "I'll bring the food," he offered. "You've had enough to manage these past 2 days." Catherine's cottage was small but welcoming, with bookshelves lining one wall and simple, tasteful furnishings that reflected her practical nature. When Wyatt arrived that evening with a basket of food from the hotel restaurant, she had changed into a fresh dress and pinned up her hair, though signs of fatigue still showed in her face. "This is lovely," she said as he unpacked the meal: roast chicken, potatoes, and apple cobbler. "Far better than anything I could have prepared." They ate at her small table, the conversation flowing easily between them as they discussed the mine situation, the school's progress, and the approaching winter. It wasn't until they had finished eating and moved to sit by the small fireplace that Catherine returned to the subject of his declaration the previous night. "You said you care for me," she began, her hands folded in her lap. "I need to know what that means to you, Wyatt." He considered his response carefully. "It means that knowing you has brought life back into my days. It means I think about you when we're apart and I find joy in your presence when we're together." He paused, gathering courage. "It means I'm falling in love with you, Catherine, though I never expected to love anyone after Martha." Catherine's expression softened, but there was hesitation in her eyes. "I care for you too deeply. But there are things about my past that I haven't shared, things that might change how you see me." "Nothing could change what I feel," Wyatt said with certainty. She took a deep breath. "My engagement, I didn't tell you everything. When James returned from the war, he was indeed changed. Bitter, angry, as I said, but there was more." Her hands tightened in her lap. "He became violent, not just in words but in actions." Understanding dawned on Wyatt, along with a surge of protective anger toward a man he'd never met. "He hurt you." Catherine nodded, her gaze fixed on the fire. "The first time he apologized profusely, blamed it on the horrors he'd seen in battle. I forgave him. The second time I began to doubt. By the third time I knew I had to leave, despite what society would say about a broken engagement." "You did the right thing," Wyatt said firmly. "My parents didn't think so. They believed a good woman could heal a damaged man through patience and devotion. When I refused to reconcile with James, they threatened to disown me." A sad smile touched her lips. "The war and then typhoid made that threat moot, but by then the damage to my reputation was done. No respectable man in Virginia would consider me as a wife after I had abandoned a returning soldier in his time of need." "That's absurd," Wyatt said, anger coloring his tone. "You had every right to protect yourself." Not everyone saw it that way. Catherine finally looked at him directly. "I tell you this because I need to know that you understand what you're getting into with me. I'm considered damaged goods back east, a spinster who rejected her duty. And I will never, ever again be with someone who thinks my primary value lies in my obedience or willingness to endure mistreatment." Wyatt moved to kneel before her chair, taking her hands in his. "Catherine, listen to me. What happened to you was wrong, both what James did and how your family and community responded. I would never ask you to be anything other than exactly who you are: strong, intelligent, compassionate, and braver than anyone I know." Tears welled in her eyes. "Do you truly mean that?" "With all my heart." He squeezed her hands gently. "I love you not despite your past, but including it. Everything you've experienced has shaped the woman you are today, the woman I've come to love." A tear slipped down her cheek, which he gently wiped away with his thumb. "I love you too, Wyatt," she whispered. I think I have since that first night in your kitchen, though I scarcely admitted it to myself then. Slowly, giving her time to withdraw if she wished, Wyatt leaned forward and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, a promise rather than a demand, and when he pulled back, the smile that illuminated her face was like sunrise after the longest night. "Stay a while longer?" she asked softly. "As long as you want," he replied. They talked late into the evening, sharing more of their pasts, their hopes, their dreams for the future. By the time Wyatt finally rose to leave, a new understanding had grown between them, a foundation of honesty and respect upon which something lasting could be built. At her door, he kissed her again, this time with greater confidence. "May I call on you properly, court you as you deserve to be courted?" Catherine laughed, the sound clear and joyful. "We've been courting for months, Wyatt Grant, whether we acknowledged it or not. But yes, you may call on me properly. I should like that very much." The weeks that followed were among the happiest of Wyatt's life. He and Catherine settled into a routine that included regular suppers at each other's homes, Sunday walks after church, and collaboration on community projects. As winter descended on Belmont, bringing snow to the mountains and a festive spirit to the town, their relationship deepened and strengthened. The mine reopened in December, with improved safety measures implemented as promised. Wyatt's standing in the community continued to grow, with many suggesting he should run for mayor in the spring elections. He deflected such talk, content with his expanded role on the town council and his thriving store, which now included a proper lending library in partnership with Catherine's school. Christmas approached, bringing with it preparations for the town's holiday celebration. Catherine organized a pageant with her students, while Wyatt donated supplies for decorations and treats. Together, they helped arrange for every child in Belmont to receive a small gift, regardless of their family's means. On Christmas Eve, after the pageant and community dinner, Wyatt invited Catherine to his homestead. The kitchen that had once seemed so empty was now warm and inviting, decorated with pine boughs and candles. A small tree stood in the corner, adorned with simple ornaments made by Catherine's students. "It looks like a home again," Catherine said, taking in the transformed space. "It feels like one too," Wyatt replied, helping her remove her cloak. "I have something for you." From a drawer, he withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper, similar to the coffee package she had brought to his door that first night. Catherine unwrapped it carefully to reveal a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with her initials. "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the soft leather. "Open it," he encouraged. Inside, on the first page, he had written a message. "For the woman who reminded me how to live, may these pages hold our story as it unfolds." Catherine looked up, her eyes bright with emotion. "Wyatt, this is wonderful. There's something else." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Kneeling before her, he opened it to reveal a simple gold ring set with a single pearl. "Catherine Abernathy, I love you more than I thought possible. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Catherine's hand flew to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. For a moment she couldn't speak, and Wyatt felt a flicker of uncertainty. "If it's too soon," he began. "No," she interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. "It's not too soon." "Yes, Wyatt, yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to gather her in his arms, his heart fuller than he had ever imagined it could be again. "When?" he asked, once they had shared a kiss that sealed their promise. "Spring," she suggested. "When the wildflowers return to the meadows." "Spring it is," he agreed. "Though that feels like a long time to wait," Catherine smiled up at him. "We have the rest of our lives, Wyatt Grant. A few months is nothing in comparison." They were married on a perfect April day in 1877, with the mountains still capped with snow but the valley bursting with new growth. The entire town turned out for the ceremony, held in the newly expanded schoolhouse that now doubled as Belmont's community center. Even Mayor Thornton attended, though his congratulations seemed more political than heartfelt. Catherine wore a simple gown of ivory satin with lace at the collar and cuffs, her hair adorned with small white flowers. Wyatt, standing at the front of the room waiting for her, felt his breath catch at the sight of her walking toward him, radiant with happiness. Their vows were traditional but spoken with deep personal meaning, each word a promise they intended to keep. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, the cheers from the assembled townsfolk nearly drowned out the final blessing. The celebration continued well into the evening with dancing, feasting, and many toasts to the couple's happiness. As the festivities wound down, Wyatt and Catherine slipped away to begin their new life together at the homestead, which they had spent weeks preparing for their shared future. That night, as they stood in the kitchen where their story had begun, Catherine turned to her new husband with a mischievous smile. "There's still coffee if you'd share," she said, echoing her words from that first evening. Wyatt pulled her close, his heart overflowing with love. "I'll share everything with you, Catherine Grant, today and all our tomorrows." The years that followed brought challenges and joys in equal measure. The mine's fortunes waxed and waned with the price of silver, and Belmont experienced its share of booms and busts. Wyatt and Catherine weathered them all, their partnership proving resilient in the face of adversity. In 1879, Catherine gave birth to their first child, a son they named James William Grant, in a gesture of healing that acknowledged Catherine's past while embracing their future. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth Martha Grant, completing their family. The school continued to thrive under Catherine's leadership, eventually expanding to include a high school curriculum that prepared students for college or professional training. Wyatt's store grew as well, becoming a regional supply center that served communities throughout the county. In 1882, Wyatt finally agreed to run for mayor after Thornton retired, winning handily on a platform of responsible growth and community investment. Under his leadership, Belmont avoided the fate of many mining towns, diversifying its economy to include agriculture, small manufacturing, and eventually tourism as the Transcontinental Railroad brought visitors to admire the Rocky Mountain scenery. Through it all, Wyatt and Catherine's love remained the cornerstone of their lives. Each evening, no matter how busy their days had been, they made time to share coffee in the kitchen where they had first connected, discussing their children, their work, their dreams for the future. On their 25th anniversary in 1902, surrounded by their children, their children's spouses, and their 4 grandchildren, Wyatt raised his cup in a toast to his wife. "To Catherine," he said, his voice still strong despite the silver that now streaked his hair, "who knocked on my door one evening and changed my life forever." Catherine's eyes, still bright with intelligence and warmth, met his across the table they had shared for a quarter century. "To us," she countered, raising her own cup, "and to coffee shared between friends who became lovers who became family." Their grandchildren giggled at such open affection between old people, but James and Elizabeth exchanged knowing glances. They had grown up witnessing the deep bond between their parents, a love born in the aftermath of loss, nurtured through adversity, and sustained by mutual respect and unwavering commitment. Later that evening, when the family had departed and the house was quiet once more, Wyatt found Catherine in their kitchen, gazing out the window at the land they had cultivated together. "Any regrets?" he asked softly, coming to stand beside her. Catherine turned to him, her smile as radiant as it had been on their wedding day. "Not one," she said, reaching for his hand. "Every step of our journey has led us here, and here is exactly where I want to be." Wyatt gathered her in his arms, marveling at how perfectly she still fit against him after all these years. "Do you remember what you said that first night, about the loneliest people in Belmont?" "I remember everything about that night," she said, resting her head against his chest. "It was the beginning of everything. You were right, I was lonely, more than I could admit, even to myself." He pressed a kiss to her hair, now streaked with elegant silver. "But I haven't been lonely a single day since you knocked on my door and offered to share your coffee." Catherine looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the love that had sustained them through joy and sorrow, plenty and want, health and illness. "And I never will be again as long as you're by my side." In that moment, in the kitchen where their story had begun, they were not the respected mayor and beloved teacher, not the successful merchant and community leader, not even the parents and grandparents their family knew and loved. They were simply Wyatt and Catherine, two souls who had found in each other the courage to begin again, the strength to face life's challenges together, and the wisdom to cherish each day of their shared journey. Outside, the sun set on Belmont, Colorado, casting long shadows across the town they had helped to build. But in their kitchen, illuminated by lamplight and love, Wyatt and Catherine Grant stood embraced in the warmth of a connection that had begun with a simple invitation. "There's still coffee if you'd share," and grown into a lifetime of moments, both ordinary and extraordinary, shared between two hearts that had found their home in each other.